Welcome, dear listeners, to The Shadow Behind You, the channel where the forgotten whisper their secrets from the grave, where cursed bloodlines weave their webs across centuries, and where vanishing families leave only echoes in the dark. Tonight, we delve into a tale so shrouded in mist and madness that it clings to your skin like the chill of an autumn fog. This is the macabre tale of the woman who saw too much. No one believed her until it was too late. Imagine, if you will, a world where the veil between the seen and the unseen is as thin as a spider's thread, trembling at the slightest breath. In the gaslit alleys of 19th century London, where the Thames slithers like a serpent through the heart of the empire, lived a woman named Eleanor Vos. She was not born to wealth or notoriety. No, hers was a lineage of quiet despair, rooted in the damp soil of forgotten villages where ancient curses lingered like rot in the earth. Eleanor possessed a gift, or was it a curse, that allowed her to peer into the shadows of what was to come. Visions, they called them, but these were no gentle dreams. They were lacerations on the soul, bleeding images of horror that no one else could see. Picture her now, a slight figure in a threadbare gown, her pale face framed by raven hair that fell like funeral veils over eyes too wide, too knowing. She moved through the crowded streets like a ghost herself, dodging the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the hawking cries of vendors peddling withered flowers and dubious elixirs. But beneath the bustle, Eleanor carried a weight heavier than the fog that choked the city, a foreknowledge of atrocities that clawed at her mind, demanding to be heard. Yet, in an age where women were expected to embroider silence and men wielded the scepter of reason, her warnings fell like autumn leaves, unnoticed and trampled underfoot. What if I told you that Eleanor's visions were not mere hallucinations, but harbingers from a realm where time unravels like frayed rope? What if the horrors she foresaw, murders in moonlit courtyards, fires devouring entire districts, plagues creeping through the sewers, were dismissed as the ravings of a hysterical spinster? No one believed her until it was too late, and by then the shadows had claimed their due, leaving behind a trail of regret etched in blood and ash. As we embark on this journey, let the darkness envelop you. Feel the prickle on your neck, as if unseen eyes watch from the corners of your room. For in Eleanor's story, we uncover not just a personal tragedy, but a mirror to our own blindness, the refusal to heed the whispers of the damned. Settle in, turn down the lights, and listen closely. The tale begins in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath and the shadows start to stir. Music intensifies slightly, with a subtle crescendo of strings mimicking a heartbeat, fading into the narrative. Eleanor's childhood was a tapestry of ordinary woes, woven in the rural hamlet of Blackthorn Hollow, a place where the moors stretched endlessly under skies perpetually bruised with storm clouds. Born in 1842 to a miller father and a seamstress mother, she was the youngest of 5, her siblings robust and grounded. While she seemed fragile as porcelain, prone to fainting spells and night terrors that left her screaming into the void, the villagers whispered of the Vos family curse, a legend as old as the hollow itself, claiming that every 3rd generation bore a seer, doomed to witness the unseen and pay for it with their sanity. But it was on her 12th birthday, under a blood moon that painted the fields crimson, that the gift first manifested. Eleanor had wandered into the ancient woods bordering the hollow, drawn by an inexplicable pull, like fingers tugging at her hem. The trees there were twisted sentinels, their branches clawing at the sky, and the ground was littered with stones etched in runes long forgotten. As she knelt by a stagnant pool, the water rippled without wind, and in its depths she saw not her reflection, but a vision her eldest brother, Thomas, crushed beneath the mill's grinding wheels, his blood mingling with the flour like red snow. She bolted home, gasping, her dress torn by brambles, and blurted the horror to her family. "Thomas mustn't go to the mill tomorrow," she cried, her voice a splintered whisper. But they laughed it off, kindly at first, then with irritation, as the imaginings of a fanciful child. Thomas, ever the dutiful son, went anyway, and by noon the accident claimed him just as she had foreseen. The family mourned, but suspicion turned on Eleanor. "Which child?" the villagers muttered, crossing themselves as she passed. Her mother, grief-stricken, locked her away, dosing her with laudanum to dull the demons in her head. Years passed, and the visions ebbed but never vanished. They lurked like predators in the underbrush of her mind, waiting for moments of vulnerability. By her 20th year, Eleanor had fled to London, seeking anonymity in the teeming metropolis. She found work as a governess in the household of Lord Harrington, a stern widower with 2 young daughters in a grand but decaying mansion on the outskirts of Mayfair. The house was a labyrinth of creaking floors and shadowed corridors, where portraits of stern ancestors glared down with eyes that seemed to follow her. It was here, amid the opulence laced with decay, that the visions returned with vengeance. One stormy evening, as thunder rattled the panes like skeletal fingers, Eleanor sat by the nursery fire, mending a doll's dress. The flames danced erratically, casting elongated shadows that twisted into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, her needle slipped, pricking her finger, and a drop of blood fell onto the fabric. In that instant, the room blurred, and she was transported. She saw Lord Harrington's eldest daughter, little Amelia, tumbling down the grand staircase, her neck snapping like dry twigs, her eyes wide in eternal surprise. The vision was so vivid, the crack of bone, the metallic tang of blood, the child's final gasp, that Eleanor retched onto the hearth. She rushed to warn the lord, bursting into his study, where he pored over ledgers under the glow of a single lamp. "My lord, Amelia must not play near the stairs." "I have seen it. A terrible fall." Her words tumbled out, frantic and unbidden. Harrington, a man of science and skepticism, regarded her with cold disdain. "Miss Voss, such superstitions have no place in this house. Compose yourself, or seek employment elsewhere." The servants gossiped, calling her the mad governess, and Amelia, oblivious, continued her games. 3 days later, during a raucous chase with her sister, she slipped on a loose rug and plummeted. The household plunged into mourning, and Eleanor was dismissed, branded a harbinger of ill fortune. But the visions did not cease. They multiplied, like rats in the sewers below the city. Eleanor took lodgings in Whitechapel, a district festering with poverty and vice, where the air reeked of gin and despair. Here, amid the squalor, her gift sharpened into a blade that cut deeper with each revelation. She saw strangers' fates, a baker poisoned by his wife, a prostitute strangled in an alley, a child swept away by the Thames' hungry currents. Each time, she tried to intervene, slipping anonymous notes under doors, confronting the doomed in the streets, but her pleas were met with mockery or violence. "Crazy wench," they snarled, shoving her into the mud. One particularly harrowing night, as fog blanketed the city like a shroud, Eleanor awoke screaming from a dream that was no dream. She envisioned a fire raging through the tenements of Shadwell, flames leaping like demons, consuming families in their sleep. The heat scorched her skin even in waking. She could smell the charring flesh, hear the agonized cries piercing the night. Desperate, she ran to the local constable, pounding on his door until her knuckles bled. "A fire in Shadwell! Tomorrow at dusk! Evacuate them!" The officer, bleary-eyed and dismissive, laughed. "Go home, lass. Too much opium in your veins." No one believed her until the blaze erupted, just as foretold, claiming dozens in its infernal maw. Whispers spread. Was she a prophetess or a pyromaniac? Suspicion mounted, shadows lengthened. Eleanor's isolation deepened, her once vibrant eyes now hollowed by sleepless nights. She wandered the streets like a spectre, her visions a relentless torrent. But amid the chaos, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of Dr. Elias Thorne, an eccentric physician specializing in nervous disorders. He found her collapsed in Hyde Park, muttering prophecies to the ravens. Intrigued by her tales, he offered sanctuary in his clinic, a converted asylum on the city's fringes, where the walls echoed with the moans of the afflicted. Thorne, with his wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers, believed in the occult fringes of science, mesmerism, phrenology, and the etheric veil. "Your gift is a bridge to the beyond," he told her, his voice a soothing balm. For the first time, someone listened. Under Thorn's care, Eleanor documented her visions in a leather-bound journal, its pages filling with sketches of horrors, disemboweled victims in fog-shrouded lanes, collapsing bridges over the river, assassinations in opulent ballrooms. Thorn hypothesized that her bloodline traced back to the seers of ancient Celtic druids, cursed by Roman invaders to forever witness but never alter fate. Together they experimented, hypnotic trances, herbal infusions, to control the onslaught. But the visions grew darker, more personal. Eleanor began seeing her own reflection in the carnage, a omen that chilled her to the core. As winter gripped London in icy talons, the visions coalesced into a singular nightmare, a shadowy figure stalking the East End, a blade glinting under gaslight, women falling one by one in pools of crimson. This was no ordinary killer. He was a phantom cloaked in the city's sins, his identity shrouded even from her sight. The Ripper, she named him in her journal. Though the world had yet to know that moniker, she confided in Thorn, urging him to alert the authorities. He strikes first in Cannon Street Road, under the harvest moon. Thorn, torn between belief and caution, penned a letter to Scotland Yard, attributing the warning to an anonymous informant. But the Yard, buried in mundane crimes, filed it away as another crank missive. The first murder came as she predicted. A woman named Marianne Nichols, throat slit, body mutilated in the pre-dawn gloom. Eleanor felt it in her bones, a psychic echo that left her bedridden for days. More visions followed Annie Chapman in Hanbury Street, her organs arranged like a grotesque offering. Eleanor pleaded with Thorn to do more, but fear gripped him. "They'll lock us both away," he whispered. Society's elite dismissed such tales as fodder for penny dreadfuls, while the poor drowned their terrors in aisle. No one believed until the body count rose and the city trembled. And so, dear listeners, we plunge deeper into the labyrinth of Eleanor's torment, where each vision peeled back another layer of her fragile sanity. Let us return to those fog-choked streets of London, where the gas lamps flickered like dying stars, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out with clawed hands. Eleanor Voss, now in her late 20s, had become a wraith in human form, her skin pallid as moonlight, her movements jerky, as if puppeteered by unseen forces. Dr. Thorn's clinic provided refuge, but it was a gilded cage, its halls lined with padded cells where other visionaries muttered to walls that whispered back. Eleanor's days blurred into a ritual of endurance. Mornings began with Thorn's examinations. He would strap her to a velvet chaise, his fingers probing her skull for phrenological bumps, seeking the seat of her second sight. "Tell me what you see," he'd urge, his breath smelling of pipe tobacco and regret. And she would, in halting words, describe the kaleidoscope of doom, a carriage overturning in Piccadilly, spilling nobility into the gutter like broken dolls, a factory explosion in Manchester, where workers' screams mingled with the hiss of steam, even global portents, like a great war brewing across the seas, where fields would run red with the blood of empires. But it was the personal visions that clawed deepest. One afternoon, as sunlight slanted through barred windows like prison bars of gold, Eleanor seized in convulsion. Her eyes rolled back, revealing whites veined with crimson, and she spoke in a voice not her own, guttural, ancient. The child in the attic, poisoned by the nursemaid's envy, belladonna in the milk. Thorn, alarmed, dispatched a messenger to a nearby estate where a prominent family resided. The warning arrived anonymously, but the nursemaid, confronted, fled into the night. The child survived, but no credit came to Eleanor. Instead, rumors of witchcraft swirled, and Thorn's practice suffered. Emboldened by this near success, Eleanor ventured out more, her cloak a shroud against prying eyes. She haunted the British Museum's reading rooms, poring over tomes on occult lore, grimoires from medieval monks, accounts of Scottish second sighters, even Egyptian papyri speaking of oracles cursed by gods. In these yellowed pages, she found echoes of her plight. Women like her, labeled hysterics or heretics, burned or bedlam-bound for daring to voice the unseen. One entry chilled her, the tale of Cassandra of Troy, Gifted prophecy by Apollo, then doomed to disbelief. Am I her reincarnation? Eleanor confided to her journal, her script trembling like leaves in a gale. The visions escalated in vividness, assaulting all senses. No longer mere sights, they brought smells, the acrid bite of gunpowder, the sweet rot of decay sounds, the gurgle of a slit throat, the crackle of flames on flesh, even tastes like coppery blood on her tongue. One such episode struck in Covent Garden Market, amid the riot of colours and cries. As she haggled for bread, the world dissolved. She saw a cholera outbreak sweeping the slums, bodies piled like cordwood, the river bloated with corpses. Gasping, she collapsed into a vendor's stall, scattering apples that rolled like severed heads. Passers-by helped her up, but her warnings, "Seal the wells! The water is poisoned!" earned only pitying glances and hurried retreats. Weeks later, the epidemic hit, just as foreseen, claiming thousands in its watery grip. Eleanor, racked with guilt, retreated to Thorne's attic, where she paced like a caged animal. "Why show me if I cannot change it?" she raged, smashing a mirror that reflected her haunted face in shards. Thorne, ever the scientist, theorized temporal loops, visions as echoes of fixed events unalterable as stone. But Eleanor sensed more, a malevolent intelligence behind them, an entity feeding on her despair, growing stronger with each ignored cry. Enter Amelia Hargrove, a society debutante and Thorne's niece, who visited the clinic under pretense of charity. Amelia, with her porcelain skin and auburn curls, represented everything Eleanor lacked: privilege, poise, belief in a rational world. Intrigued by her uncle's pet project, Amelia befriended Eleanor, sharing teas laced with sympathy. "Tell me your secrets," she'd coo, her eyes gleaming with morbid curiosity. Eleanor, starved for connection, obliged, recounting a vision of a train derailment on the London-Brighton line, carriages crumpling like paper, screams piercing the steam. Amelia laughed it off as fancy, but promised to warn her father, a railway baron. The derailment occurred, killing scores, including Amelia's cousin. Shaken, she returned, accusing Eleanor. "Did you cause this with your dark thoughts?" The friendship fractured, but not before Amelia spread tales in salons, painting Eleanor as a modern Sebel, alluring yet dangerous. Suitors came calling, not for romance, but spectacle. Dandies seeking thrills, occultists probing her mind. One, a sinister mesmerist named Victor Slade, attempted to hypnotize her, his pendulum swinging like a noose. Under trance, Eleanor revealed a vision of his own demise, drowned in the Thames, weights chained to his ankles by betrayed acolytes. Terrified, Slade fled, but not before branding her a harpy of hell. As spring thawed the city, Eleanor's visions converged on a grand and catastrophe: the collapse of the Crystal Palace during the Great Exhibition's anniversary. Beams buckling under phantom strain, glass shattering like thunder, entombing visitors in a glittering grave. She begged Thorne to intervene, but drafting petitions to Parliament. But bureaucracy buried them, officials scoffing at female vapors. The pressure mounted. Eleanor's health faltered, hair falling in clumps, skin erupting in ethereal marks like stigmata. In delirium, she saw the entity behind her gift, a shadowy form with eyes like abyssal voids, whispering, "See and suffer." Thorne, desperate, consulted colleagues, but they recommended committal to Bedlam. "She's beyond science," they said. Betrayed, Eleanor escaped into the night, her path leading to the heart of darkness, the Ripper's domain. Here, in Part-Eye's twilight, we leave her teetering on the precipice, visions swirling like storm clouds, the city a tinderbox awaiting its spark. Now, as the fog thickens and the gas lamps dim, we descend further into Eleanor's abyss, where the line between vision and reality blurs like ink in water. The city of London, that sprawling beast of brick and iron, seemed to pulse with malice, its arteries of alleys pumping secrets and sins. Eleanor, fugitive from Thorne's clinic, melted into the underbelly of Whitechapel, where the poor huddled in rookeries like rats in a sinking ship. Her visions, once sporadic storms, now raged incessantly, a deluge drowning her waking hours. She found shelter in a derelict boarding house run by a one-eyed crone named Mrs. Grimshaw, who rented rooms for pennies and asked no questions. The place reeked of mildew and despair, walls papered with peeling florals that hid stains of unknown origin. Here, Eleanor barricaded herself, her journal her only companion, pages crammed with frantic scrawls, diagrams of murder scenes, timelines of disasters, pleas to an indifferent God. But solitude amplified the horrors. At night, the visions invaded her dreams, morphing into nightmares where she became the victim. Her throat slashed, her body eviscerated under the Ripper's blade. The killer's shadow loomed largest. Eleanor's foresight painted him not as a man, but a manifestation of London's rot, a silhouette in top hat and cape, face obscured by swirling mist, his knife an extension of the city's cruelty. She saw his next strike, Elizabeth Stride in Dutfield's yard, her life ebbing in a gurgle of blood. Desperate, Eleanor ventured out, cloaked in anonymity, to the yard, a narrow passage stinking of horse manure and fear. She waited in the shadows, heart hammering like a funeral drum, and when Stride appeared, a wary prostitute seeking solace, Eleanor approached. "Leave this place! Death stalks you tonight!" Stride, hardened by streets, spat and shoved her away. Hours later, the scream pierced the night. The body was found, mutilated as foreseen. Eleanor fled, guilt a lead weight in her chest. Word of her prophecies spread through the underworld like plague. Vigilantes sought her, some for aid, others for blame. A group of dock workers cornered her in a tavern, their breath foul with rum. "You knew about Nichols! Why didn't you stop it?" They roughed her up, leaving bruises that bloomed like dark flowers. But one, a burly Irishman named O'Sullivan, believed. "Me sister's next," he growled, describing a vision Eleanor had muttered in delirium. Together, they plotted warnings posted on walls, anonymous tips to the press. The newspapers, hungry for sensation, dubbed her the Whitechapel Oracle, printing caricatures of a wild-eyed witch amid bloody headlines. Yet disbelief reigned supreme. Scotland Yard, under Commissioner Warren, dismissed her as a hoaxer. Thorne, regretting his abandonment, searched for her, leaving notes in occult bookshops. He found her emaciated in Grimshaw's attic, visions ravaging her like fever. "The entity feeds on chaos," she whispered, her voice a rasp. "It wants the city to burn." Thorne smuggled her back, but the clinic was no sanctuary. Patients whispered of her as a bad omen, and one night, a fire, small but sinister, erupted in the kitchens, mirroring a vision she'd ignored. The climax built like a gathering storm. Eleanor's visions revealed the Ripper's identity, not a lowly butcher, as papers speculated, but a figure from high society. Dr. William Gull, royal physician, his mind fractured by syphilis and occult dabblings. Notey, this blends folklore with our tales fiction. She saw him in trance, dissecting bodies in a hidden chamber, believing he excised demons from the flesh. Horrified, she confided in Thorne, who risked everything by confronting Gull at a soiree. "Seize your madness, or the Oracle will expose you." Gull, eyes glittering with insanity, laughed. The mad see only illusions. That night, Gull struck twice, Stride and Eddowes, escalating the terror. Eleanor, sensing the endgame, attempted a ritual from her museum, Tums, a circle of salt and herbs, chanting to banish the entity. But it backfired. The shadow manifested, a vortex of darkness that sucked light from the room, whispering temptations, "Join me and alter fate." She resisted, but the effort shattered her, veins bursting in her eyes, blood trickling from ears. Thorne found her catatonic, murmuring of a final vision. The Ripper's capture thwarted, his legacy enduring as eternal nightmare. As autumn bled into winter, the murders ceased mysteriously. Gull, in our tale, succumbing to his disease in secrecy. But Eleanor's warnings, scattered like leaves, were pieced together too late. The city mourned its dead, but forgot its seer. She lingered in Thorne's care, a shell, until one dawn she vanished. Door locked from inside, window unbroken. Only her journal remained, pages fluttering in an unnatural breeze. Was she claimed by the shadows? Or did she step through the veil, becoming the entity herself? No one believed her tale, until echoes resurfaced in later seers, whispering the same dread. To fully grasp the chill of Eleanor's saga, we must peel back the layers of history, where fact and folklore entwine like vines over a grave. Our tale draws from the murky waters of 19th century Britain, an era of industrial triumph shadowed by supernatural dread. Victorian London was a dichotomy, gleaming progress atop festering undercurrents, where spiritualism flourished amid scientific skepticism. Seers like Eleanor echoed real figures, women whose gifts clashed with patriarchal norms, often leading to institutionalization or worse. Consider the roots in Celtic mythology. Ancient druids, priests of mist-shrouded groves, revered seers as conduits to the otherworld. Legends speak of the Tabe seer, Scottish second-sighters who foresaw deaths as corpse candles, floating over moors. Eleanor's Voss lineage harks to this, Blackthorn Hollow, fictional yet inspired by places like Glastonbury, where Arthurian myths blend with pagan curses. Roman invaders fearing these prophets, cursed bloodlines, echoed in tales like the Mabinogion, where prophetic women suffered disbelief. Fast forward to the witch hunts. In 16th, 17th century England, over 500 were executed for witchcraft, many for claimed visions. Take Agnes Waterhouse, hanged in 1566 for foretelling calamities via familiars, or the Pendle Witches of 1612, where Demdike's clan was accused of cursing foes with foresight. These women, often poor or outspoken, were scapegoats for societal fears, plagues, famines, wars. Eleanor's dismissals mirror this, labeled hysteric, a term from Greek hystera, zeba implying female madness. Freud later pathologized it, but in Victorian times, it justified locking women in asylums like Bethlem's Bedlam, where moral treatment masked torture. The Ripper murders ground our narrative in grim reality. From August to November 1888, Jack the Ripper slew at least 5 women in Whitechapel, their mutilations suggesting medical knowledge. Theories abound. Dr. Gull in the Royal Conspiracy, folklore, allegedly covered up Prince Albert Victor's scandals. Though debunked, it fuels our tale, Gull's syphilis-induced madness aligning with occult motifs. Contemporary psychics like Robert James Lees claimed visions of the killer, offering leads to Yard, but were ignored, much like Eleanor. Lees described chasing a spectral figure, only to be dismissed as charlatan. Spiritualism boomed in the 1850s, 1900s, with seances in parlors where mediums channeled the dead. Figures like the Fox sisters sparked it, but frauds abounded. Helena Blavatsky's theosophy blended Eastern mysticism with Western occult, positing Stroll Plains, where visions originate. Eleanor's entity echoes this, perhaps an elemental spirit feeding on fear. Cultural trauma fueled it. The Industrial Revolution displaced rural folk, breeding urban alienation. Cholera epidemics 1832, 1849, 1854 killed tens of thousands. Ignored warnings from sanitarians like John Snow paralleling Eleanor's pleas. Broader contexts include ignored prophets throughout history. Cassandra, as mentioned, warned of Troy's fall but was cursed by Apollo. In biblical lore, Jeremiah's dooms were mocked until Jerusalem burned. Native American shamans foresaw colonial genocides, their visions dismissed as savage superstition. In Africa, Yoruba oracles used Ifa divination to predict calamities, often heeded, but colonial powers branded them pagan. Eleanor's story weaves these threads, highlighting how power structures silence the marginalized. Victorian literature amplified such themes. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein explores hubris against the unknown. Bram Stoker's Dracula pits reason against supernatural. Penny Dreadfuls like Varney the Vampire sensationalized horrors, while Arthur Conan Doyle, a spiritualist, believed in fairies and mediums. His Sherlock Holmes dismissed occult, yet Doyle consulted seers. This duality mirrors Thorne, scientist yet believer. Culturally, the era's gender dynamics sealed Eleanor's fate. Women were angels in the house, per Coventry Patmore's poem, expected to nurture, not prophecy. Suffragettes like Emmeline Pankhurst fought this, but in 1888 they were radicals. Eleanor's madness reflects real cases. Alice James, sister of Henry, confined for neurasthenia. Virginia Woolf's bouts, inspired by Victorian oppression. Folklore adds erudition. Banshees wailing omens in Irish tales, doppelgangers signaling death in German lore. Eleanor's disappearing act evokes fairy abductions, where seers vanish into mounds. In Japanese yokai stories, Itako shamans commune with spirits, blinded to heightened sight, paralleling her psychic toll. Blending these, our tale gains authenticity, a cautionary whisper from history's shadows, reminding that ignored voices often herald truth. As we explore, feel the weight of centuries, the chill of forgotten graves stirring beneath your feet. Beneath the surface of Eleanor's macabre odyssey lies a web of symbols and psyches, a mirror to humanity's darkest recesses. This tale is no mere ghost story, it's a dissection of universal fears, cultural wounds, and the human condition's fragility. Let us probe these depths with an ominous lens, where each revelation uncoils like a serpent in the grass. Symbolically, Eleanor's visions represent the Cassandra complex, a psychological archetype where truth-tellers are disbelieved, leading to isolation. Coined by philosopher Gaston Bachelard, it stems from mythic Cassandra, cursed to foresee doom without credence. In our narrative, this manifests as societal gaslighting. Eleanor's gift, a feminine intuition, clashes with masculine rationalism. It echoes feminist critiques. Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex argues women are ordered, their insights dismissed as irrational. Eleanor's bruises and confinement symbolize this oppression, her bloodied journal a testament to silenced voices. Psychologically, the story delves into the toll of hyper-empathy. Modern neuroscience links second sight to synesthesia or temporal lobe epilepsy, where seizures produce vivid hallucinations. Eleanor's sensory overload, tasting blood, smelling decay, mirrors this, perhaps amplified by trauma brother's death. Freudian analysis sees visions as repressed desires erupting, the entity as her devouring ego. Jungian shadows loom larger, the Ripper as collective unconscious archetype, a shadow self, embodying Victorian repression, sexuality, violence suppressed under propriety's veneer. Eleanor's confrontation with it symbolizes individuation, but at sanity's cost. Thematically, disbelief ties to fear of the unknown. Humanity clings to control, rejecting prophecies that shatter illusions. This connects to existential dread, Kierkegaard's anguish before the abyss. In a post-Enlightenment world, science demystifies, yet the supernatural persists, haunting like Freud's uncanny. Eleanor's ignored warnings reflect cognitive dissonance. Societies deny threats, climate change, pandemics, until catastrophe strikes. Her story warns of hubris, akin to Icarus ignoring Daedalus. Cultural trauma infuses the narrative. Victorian Britain, empire at zenith. Hid underclasses suffering. Whitechapel's poverty, a wound from industrialization. The Ripper murders exposed this, symbolizing class warfare. Killer as avenger or elite predator. Eleanor's lower-class roots amplify marginalization, her visions a cry against inequality. Globally, it parallels colonized peoples' ignored prophecies, indigenous warnings of ecological ruin dismissed by invaders. In African-American folklore, root workers foresaw lynchings, their gifts rooted in survival amid trauma. Human nature's duality emerges, curiosity versus fear. Thorne embodies this, drawn to Eleanor's gift yet retreating from its implications. It questions free will, our visions deterministic, fate unalterable. Philosophers like Spinoza argue predestination. Eleanor attempts to change outcomes suggest agency, but failure implies cosmic cruelty. The entity personifies this, a Lovecraftian horror, indifferent to suffering, feeding on chaos like entropy. Ominously, the tale explores voyeurism. Listeners, like Amelia, consume horror for thrills, complicit in Eleanor's pain. It critiques media sensationalism, penny dreadfuls profiting from tragedy. Thematically, vanishing Eleanor's end symbolizes erasure of inconvenient truths, her journal a palimpsest overwritten by history's victors, connecting to universal fears, the terror of being unseen, unheard. In a digital age, fake news echoes disbelief, psychics or whistleblowers marginalized. Psychological isolation breeds madness. Eleanor's descent, a metaphor for mental illness stigma. Ultimately, the story haunts with questions: what shadows lurk in our blind spots? Do we ignore warnings at our peril? In this exploration, feel the intellectual chill, as if forbidden knowledge seeps into your bones, leaving you forever altered. As our tale draws to its shadowed close, dear listeners, let the echoes of Eleanor's cries linger in the quiet corners of your mind. We have journeyed through fog-laden streets and fractured psyches, unearthing a woman whose gift became her grave. Eleanor Voss, the seer scorned, stands as a sentinel at the threshold of the unseen, a reminder that some truths are too terrible to bear, too piercing to believe until the blade falls. In the end, her final vision, a cataclysmic fire engulfing London not in 1666, but a future echo, came to pass in fragmented ways, whispers of ignored portents in wars and disasters yet to come. But she vanished before witnessing it, her essence perhaps absorbed into the entity she fought, forever wandering the veil. Thorne, heartbroken, burned her journal, fearing its curse, but fragments survived in occult archives, seeding legends that persist. No one believed her, until echoes resurfaced in modern seers, their warnings dismissed anew. What haunts most is the universality in every age. Voices cry from the margins, foretelling storms we refuse to see. Is the shadow behind you merely imagination or a harbinger waiting to be heeded? As the clock strikes midnight, listen closely. Perhaps you'll hear her whisper. Sleep well if you can. Until next time, on the shadow behind you, beware what you ignore.